Good morning and welcome to the June 3rd meeting of the Sandag Transportation Committee. My name is Amber Lynn Deaton. I'm Sandag's Deputy General Counsel, and in the absence of our chair and our vice chair today, I'll be assisting with commencing the meeting and the first item of business, which is the selection of a temporary chair. But before we get started with that item, I wanted to share that we will be hosting simultaneous interpretation of this meeting into Spanish and wanted to introduce our translator, Ruth, with Spanish language instructions. Ruth?
Thank you. Buenos días. Si se ha unido a la reunión de hoy en la sala de juntas de Sandag y necesita interpretación al español, por favor diríjase a la recepción del piso 8 y solicite un receptor. El receptor cuenta con un audífono para escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. The following announcement is for remote participants, and I will repeat the message in English. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor, desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, que es el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. To use the Zoom interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are located. Click on the interpretation icon, which is the world, and select either English or Spanish. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipses, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And as a reminder to committee members that are joining us from the boardroom, please use the wireless microphones when speaking so that those who are joining us virtually can hear. And also for committee members, we have headsets that are ready to receive the English interpretation should any comments be provided in Spanish. Members of the public may also check out headsets from the reception desk in the lobby. So Francesca, could you please confirm that we have quorum for the meeting?
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. So that brings us to item 1, which is the appointment of a chair pro tem. And in the absence of both the chair and the vice chair, Sandag's policies require that the committee elect a temporary chair to preside over this meeting. The authority of the temporary chair will end at the adjournment of the meeting. The action to appoint a temporary chair requires a motion and a second, which is followed by a vote of more than 50% of those members present. And unless there are any questions, we would appreciate a motion to elect a temporary chair. Supervisor Anderson? Supervisor Anderson, I see your hand raised.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate. Yes, I'm speaking. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Supervisor, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? I'd like to nominate Councilmember Zito to be the pro tem for today.
Thank you, Supervisor. Is there a second?
This is Jennifer Mendoza. I will second.
Thank you, Councilmember Mendoza. I see no further hands raised. Clerk, could we take a vote, please, to elect Councilmember Zito as the chair pro tem?
Thank you. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Joanna Schiavone.
Yes.
The City of San Diego is absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
For East
Aye.
County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
For North County Transit District is absent. For the Port of San Diego.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you log in. Was that Councilmember Edson?
This is Priyabat Patel.
Apologies, thank you very much. I have your aye recorded. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Naranjo.
Yes.
And South County is absent. And with that, that item passes with those members present.
Great. Thank you, Amberlynn. Very nice having you kick off the meeting today. Thank you for doing that for us. We'll go ahead and move on with the rest of the agenda. And I think we will go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd like to join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. That moves us on to item number 2, which is the public comments and non-agenda comments. Francesca, do we have anybody in the room that wants to make a comment?
Yes, we do. We have one member of the public in person who'd like to speak on this item, Catherine Rhodes.
Great.
You can go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Hello, this is Catherine Rhodes. My comments are really for John Kelly of the United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and Sandag staff. At the April 8th, 2022 Sandag tour of Route 11 and Otay Mesa Port of Entry, Sandag CAO stated there was a new state and federal alternative project delivery method and joint venture agreement between Sandag, Caltrans, state and federal agency, Border Patrol, and Mexico to finance and build the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project. The alternative project delivery method was allowed by new state law and Street and Highway Code section 61460, the Otay Mesa Toll Facility Act. Not sure, but I think that usually the General Service Administration actually does the federal projects, not usually Sandag staff. So what I'm doing is I'm recommending that the EPA, Sandag, and Mexico look into creating a similar new federal alternative project delivery method process like Otay Mesa East for the raw sewage border pollution issue with Mexico along the Tijuana River. Everybody's blaming the EPA for not moving fast enough to stop the ongoing pollution using the $630 million they were awarded for border infrastructure last year. A new law and agreement with EPA, Mexico, Sandag's Border Committee in charge with EPA oversight and collaboration could speed up construction. A new alternative project delivery method would allow for local control by having EPA allowed the Sandag's Border Committee to take over development of EPA-funded border infrastructure and cleanup projects in order to cut through bureaucracy and move the project forward to completion with known timelines, again with oversight by the EPA. I talked to Imperial Beach Mayor Serge Dedina, and he was positive that the idea of moving EPA projects to Sandag's control, if possible. So, you know, we don't know exactly what the EPA thinks about the idea to give their work and project management and construction to Sandag staff instead. But in order to do this, you probably need a new state law, federal EPA approvals for a joint venture, and an international agreement with Mexico. Your alternative project delivery method worked great for Route 11 and Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. With leadership in the same model for an alternative project delivery method, can work for the federal EPA and local residents who want immediate results from the EPA for the ongoing border sewage problem. And so I talked at the San Diego Regional Conformity Working Group, and they said that they're going to look into this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the public comments.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Good to see you. Do we have any board member comments for non-agenda items? Seeing nobody with their hands up, we will go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the agency report, which will be presented by Colleen.
That's right.
Virtually,
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Zito. And hello, Transportation Committee members. Unfortunately, I tested positive for COVID this morning, so I'm working from home. And I don't know, I just hope all of you are staying healthy and safe. It's kind of depressing when this happens, but I do have some good news to report from the agency perspective. So it's been a while since we've been together. And I wanted to just outline a few things that have been going on. So you may have heard a couple of weeks ago, after a 2-year hiatus, we celebrated our annual Sandag Bike to Work Day, and we recorded more than 6,800 pit stops, visits all across the region, and including Tijuana. So this is very exciting, and certainly one of the reasons why it's so important that we continue to build safe bicycle infrastructure so that people feel safe riding their bikes, whether it's to work or to various places throughout our communities. In fact, next Thursday, we'll break ground on the Barrio Logan segment of the Bayshore Bikeway. And I think you all know the Bayshore Bikeway eventually will connect bikeways all the way around San Diego Bay through multiple jurisdictions. The project will make it obviously more comfortable and convenient for people to bike and walk all along Harbor Drive as well. Tomorrow, June 4th, Sandag and Caltrans will celebrate several major milestones on the North Coast Corridor project. This includes completion of the San Elijo Lagoon restoration, new walking and biking trails, improvements on Interstate 5, and rail improvements in the Low Sand Corridor. This is really a model project when we talk about complete corridors. It's multimodal and environmental restoration. So we hope all of you will join us tomorrow at the San Elijo Lagoon Ecological Reserve for the ribbon cutting ceremony. It'll begin at 11 a.m. It's a completely family friendly event, lots of activities for everyone to enjoy. On another project, our team is also continuing to work on the Central Mobility Hub and Airport Connection. We heard clearly from the board last month how important it is to engage the board of directors and you in that process and looking at the analysis as we go through the process to identify the preferred way to make that connection to the airport and the analysis that will go into looking at the preferred location for a Central Mobility Hub. So before the recess in August, we will be bringing forward a report to the board of directors that outlines the next steps, the analysis that we plan to perform. Meanwhile, we are working with the city of San Diego to develop agreements that will outline the resources that are needed for us to look at a Central Mobility Hub in the downtown area, and really clarifying the roles and responsibilities. Sandag's role is the transportation investment. The land use piece is all in the hands of the city of San Diego. We will continue to bring you updates. I also want to acknowledge and thank the champions who've been helping us get funding for priority projects. Congressman Peters included $4 million in one of his appropriation earmark requests for FY 2023 for the Central Mobility Hub project. Congressman Vargas has included $3.5 million for the Bayshore Bikeway project in Barrio Logan. And Congressman Issa is submitting a $20 million request for the I-5 State Route 78 Managed Lane Connector project. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done to bring this funding to the region, but we really appreciate the work our delegation is doing to provide this type of funding for the important projects that are needed in our transportation system. Also, good news, we learned last Friday that we received an $8 million, what we call Chrissy Grant, to replace one of our low sand bridges in Rose Canyon. This is a longstanding safety priority for the region. I'm glad we were able to secure this funding and we can actually get underway in replacing this project. Last month, I went to Washington, D.C. to meet with the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Polly Trottenberg, and this was part of the Coalition for America's Gateway and Trade Corridors organization. I was recently appointed to serve on that board, and it's all about how we advocate for infrastructure improvements that support trade. And one of the things that we continue at Sandag to remind our federal partners about is that we have our ports, which are very important, our water ports, but our land ports of entry are equally important. I traveled with the chair of the board, Chair Blakespear, to Sacramento the following week for the annual Chamber of Commerce Legislative Advocacy visit. At where Sandag, we continue to receive high praise from multiple organizations that we're doing things right, that we are a region worth investing in when it comes to housing, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to examples of how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and meet state goals. So it was really exciting to see that support from multiple agencies, including the governor's office. Otay Mesa East continues to rise as one of the priority projects. We heard that at the state. That was one of the things we're advocating for as well in Washington, D.C. And as we get closer to construction, we are learning that the costs are going up. This is not surprising given the inflation and what we're seeing on all project costs. So we've received some initial feedback from rating agencies that we are getting the good ratings to create additional reserve in the account to fund this project. We are working on some ideas to create a $20 million reserve for the project, and we're looking to identify some potential cost savings as well. So that will be coming forward to the board, and we will certainly keep you informed. And finally, in terms of priority projects, next week on June 8th, phase 5 of the Del Mar Bluff Stabilization Project is going to the Coastal Commission for a federal coastal consistency review. So this is the permit that's required for us to actually begin that construction. I think you all know how important the Low-Sand Corridor is to our region. It's part of that lifeblood for rail, both commuter rail and freight in our community. And so being able to stabilize the bluffs as we work toward improvements will actually get the rail off the bluffs. We're hopeful we'll be able to secure funding through the state budget this year to help get that project, the rail project, shovel ready. So those are the updates for today. Happy to answer any questions, and I will turn it back to you, Chair Zito.
Thanks, Colleen. And I think I speak on behalf of the entire committee that I hope for a quick and speedy recovery, and looks like you're doing well so far, which is great to see. And hopefully it'll be a very minimal event for you with your current positive test. I also note I'm looking forward to the ribbon cutting tomorrow. And I'm hoping that people will join me in actually getting there by bike, which means that with any luck, there'll be actually an identified bike parking area for that particular event. Looking forward to that. Do we have any public member comments for Francesca?
I don't have any public comments on this item.
Okay. Are there any board members that would wish to address Colleen's comments? I do not see anybody with their hands up. So thanks again, Colleen. We will now move on to the regular agenda. Which is the consent report. And there's only one item on consent, which is the approval of the meeting minutes. Do we have any public comments on the meeting minutes, Francesca?
I don't see any hands from the public now.
Okay. Any board comments? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Anderson would be happy to make the motion.
Thank you, supervisors.
Moreno can second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Could we call for the vote?
Thank you very much. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Joanna Schiavone.
Yes.
The City of San Diego is absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Aye.
Aye.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
For North County Coastal, Chair Zito.
Zito, yes.
For North County Inland, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
For North County Transit District, Councilmember Bat Patel.
Yes.
For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Naranjo.
Yes.
And South County is absent. And that item does pass unanimously with with those members present.
Great, thanks. That takes us to item number 5 in the reports, which is the Transportation Development Act Fiscal Year 2022 Productivity Improvement Program and Fiscal Year 2023 allocations. And I believe this will be taken by Brian.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Transportation Committee. I'm going to present on the Transportation Development Act, or TDA as we commonly call it, Productivity Improvement Program and allocations. I believe we have a slideshow ready for me, folks. There we go. Thank you. You can go to the next slide. So I just want to give a quick background on the timeline and what all this means. So the TDA is a big pot of funding that MTS and Nctd get, as well as FACT as our CTSA. And each year we're required to apportion their funds based on the money we get from the state, and then look at their productivity over the course of a year or 3 years. And then later in June, staff will actually, back in April, when they do that apportionment, they ask MTS and Nctd, in fact, to send in their actual claims with the amounts that we've told them. And then we look at their productivity like we're doing now. And then later this month, you'll be hearing an item where we'll actually approve those claims and allow those funds to be given to MTS and Nctd. So on the next slide, just quickly talk about what actually is the elements of the productivity review. For MTS and Nctd, there are 6 performance measures that we go over, and we meet quarterly with staff from the 4 agencies, and look over these stats every quarter, just ensuring that the productivity is looking good. Obviously, with COVID, transit ridership was way down, so the results for a year and a half, couple years were pretty low. But as we've noticed over the last 6 months or so, both agencies are starting to come out of it, and their performance measures are looking good. There were 2 state bills passed in the last couple of years that provided relief for both transit agencies that allowed them to not need to meet the requirement of their fare box recovery ratios. So we were no longer looking at that threshold to ensure that they're meeting that, but still looking at their overall productivity, just to ensure that they're doing their best to meet their productivity goals. And then also, like it shows in the second bullet here, the other thing is, how are they responding to the recommendations that were put forward by the auditor in the last triennial performance audit? So that last audit took place just about 3 years ago. We got the reports for that and the recommendations, and they had a couple small recommendations, and we review those responses to those each year, ensuring that they're meeting those. And in fact, we're about to finish off the next triennial performance audit, and I'll be taking that item to you in a couple weeks. And just a sneak peek on that, both agencies again are in full compliance with their TDA performances, as well as with only a couple small recommendations for all our agencies. And then lastly, as part of this review, we also look at FACT, and they are now providing us a quarterly performance monitoring report. We review those reports to ensure that they're meeting all the goals that are in there. And as noted in the staff report, they are meeting all but one of those goals, and one of them was just to report the number of web hits that they receive on one of their subpages. And as they're moving forward into a new web page, they're changing over their website. That one site is not working right now, but the rest of their site is. So they're not in compliance with that part, but as they move into their new website, they'll be able to be in full compliance with that. So on the next slide, we just show the apportionments that were approved back in April. We revised the FY22 up a little bit, I believe, and then we gave the FY23 apportionments based on your recommendation to the board today. If the board approves this at their next meeting, both agencies would be allowed to receive the increase from that year over year, which is a substantial amount for both of those agencies. So lastly, the item before you today, the Transportation Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve the eligibility of the Metropolitan Transit System and North County Transit District to receive their FY 2023 Transportation Development Act allocations of funds. I think you can jump to the next slide, folks. There we go. And with that, Chair, my quick presentation is done, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Brian. Francesca, do we have any public comments or questions?
We do not have any public comments on this item.
Okay. How about any board member comments? I can't see hands right now, so if you could help Francesca if anybody has their hands up.
I don't see any hands either.
Wait a second. So without any hands, I believe we need a motion on this. This is to recommend that this be taken to the board. Is that correct? Yeah. So if I'd entertain a motion.
Ritter, so moved.
Thank you.
Moreno, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Francesca, can you call for the vote?
Thank you. And just before I take this vote, I did want to correct on the last vote. I had neglected to mention that the city of San Diego was absent, so stating that for the record. And on this item for the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Joanna Schiavone.
Yes.
The city of San Diego is absent. For the county of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
For North County Inland, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
For North County Transit District, Councilmember Bob Patel.
Yes.
For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Naranjo.
Yes.
And South County is absent. That item passes unanimously with those members present.
Great. We'll move on to item 6, which is the proposed fiscal year 2023 transit agency operating budgets. There are a number of staff presenters. I'll turn it over to one of them.
If I could, Chair, maybe just to kick off this item and kind of put it in context for you all. And so just sometimes there are questions about Sandag's role in transit compared to the operator's role in transit planning and operations. And just to make it really clear, based on legislation, Sandag's role is to plan and construct the major capital projects. And then once they're constructed, just like we did with Midcoast, then that's turned over to the operator to operate. So like with the Blue Line extension, that was in the Sandag regional plan. Sandag took the lead on the detailed work that needed to be done, the environmental clearance, the construction, and then once complete is turned over to the operators for operating. And now MTS is operating that system. So it's also a requirement that the transit agencies bring their operating budgets every year to the transportation committee. And then this way, you know, we're just making sure that this all sort of aligns with our agency, the Sandag budget as well. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Sandy, who I think is going to kick off the presentation. And then we have the presenters from Nctd as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Colleen. So good morning. Sandag is responsible for approving the transit agency budgets for funding, as Colleen just said, which has been delegated to the Transportation Committee as part of Board Policy Number 1. In April, Sandag provided the transit agencies with funding estimates, which they used as input for their budget development process. In reviewing the budget, Sandag staff has determined that the uses of funding are consistent with the estimates provided. Attachments 1 and 2 contain narrative and numerical summaries of key budget information as presented by MTS and Nctd. The MTS Board of Directors approved their fiscal year 23 budget on May 12th, and Nctd Board of Directors is scheduled to approve theirs on June 16th. So the recommendation today will be for the Transportation Committee to approve MTS and Nctd's fiscal year 23 budgets for funding. And first we have Larry Miranisi from MTS, and Yoon Parker Lynch and Chris Orlando from North County are here today to give presentations for their respective agencies.
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning, Sandag Transportation Committee members. My name is Larry Miranisi. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Metropolitan Transit System. So this morning we are going to be going over the fiscal year 2023 capital and operating budgets, as well as presenting some highlights for this past fiscal year. There we go. Ridership certainly has been a big focus for us and one of the highlights we wanted to present. And it's really been over the past year or so where we've really see us coming out of the COVID pandemic. And so the really good news, again, ridership has been improving. If we take a look at the chart here, this is a chart of passenger levels over the course of a year. The x-axis is an indication of the months, and the lines represent the fiscal year. And if you take a look at the very top bar, that blue bar, the blue line, that represents our COVID baseline. We averaged anywhere from 7.5 to 8 million passengers per year. And the very bottom bar is really when COVID hit. If you look at fiscal year 2021, we were about 45% of that baseline, so a significant hit to our ridership. You know, as we moved into fiscal year 2022, our current fiscal year, we originally projected about 11% growth over fiscal year 2021. But what we've seen is passengers are starting to come back to the system. And so we have updated that passenger growth to about 50% over fiscal year 2021, which is very positive. We're also looking at an expected increase in addition in fiscal year 2023, about a 16% ridership increase over fiscal year 2022, which is very positive. And the latest statistics, our system-wide weekday average is up to about 216,000 passengers, which is about just over 3/4 of what our pre-COVID baseline is, which is extremely positive news. Obviously, a major regional project for the community was the Midcoast Extension, or the UC San Diego Blue Line Trolley Extension. It's an 11-mile extension connecting Santa Fe Depot to the university community area, and it serves major activity areas including Old Town, Mission Bay, UCSD, and the UTC Mall. It now provides a one-seat ride from the San Ysidro border up to the UTC area. And so this extension includes 9 stations. We are operating from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. and serving the community every 15 minutes. Again, that one-seat ride from San Ysidro to UTC. We really looked at the entire system and how we could really appropriately connect our bus service to the rail to incorporate the service and make it as efficient as possible. And so we really took a look at that, and one of the statistics that is coming out of that is our Midcoast impacted trolley and bus routes are now exceeding 90% of their pre-pandemic ridership, which is extremely positive. And the latest statistics in terms of ridership, we're moving about 9,000 weekday, on average, 9,000 riders on every weekday. Another major project completed this year in partnership with Nctd was the Pronto Fare Collection System. We launched that in September of 2021. And in concurrence with the launch, we provided our customers with Pronto Free Ride Month, which allowed customers to sign up, create accounts, and get familiar with the system as we rolled it out. This is an account-based fare collection system with real-time communications, which is different than our previous system, which was a card-based system. So it really allows riders to add money to their account and allows riders to earn passes rather than pay up front. Riders always get the best possible fare, although we do provide monthly passes. And really the way that the system works is customers tap as they go to earn passes, and fares are capped at either the daily or monthly cap as they continue to ride our system. And so we have also deployed a mobile app and websites so that our customers can have on-the-fly account management. They can manage multiple cards from one account. And we really, as we were developing this system, we wanted to allow for future integrations. So we structured it with an open architecture platform to allow those future integrations. With the new system, we also wanted to be more visible and available for our ridership. Our previous network was, with our old card-based system, was about 60 locations. Our new network, we're expected by the fall of this year to grow to nearly 400 locations. So that's more accessible to our ridership. Again, I talked about the mobile app features. Again, the account management feature is really important. And also on the mobile app, our ridership can track progress toward earning passes. We also have new online capabilities, including validation of eligibility for reduced fares. And our institutional partners have an improved account management feature so that they can manage their passes. So back in 2019, CARB updated the ICT rule mandating a gradual transition to 100% zero emission fleet by 2040. And so that rule included really a phased approach in terms of how we need to convert our CNG buses to a zero emission bus. By 2023, we need to have at least 25% of our buses be zero emission. By 2027, the orders need to be 50% zero emission. And by 2030, all orders need to be 100% zero emission. And so with these time horizons, not only do we need to convert buses to ZEBs, but we also need to enable our facilities to operate them, which will require construction to facilitate the charging of these vehicles. Now we have currently 5 divisions, 4 of which support our 40 and 60-foot buses. We have our Imperial Avenue facility, which is downtown, Kearny Mesa, our South Bay facility, which is in Chula Vista, and our East County facility, which is in El Cajon. Our 5th division is also in Kearny Mesa. It's our Copley division, our Copley Park division, and it supports our minibuses and ADA paratransit. So these divisions will require the charging infrastructure, and I'll speak to that in the next slide. We're also looking to acquire a sixth division to our current facilities as we're reaching maximum capacity at our other facilities. So construction is underway at our facilities. We have a phased approach, given there's a phased approach to acquiring the zero emission buses. As you can see in the picture, we have we're going to construct an overhead gantry system to help support an efficient charging process. So the buses can drive under the gantry system. The catenary will lower to effectively and efficiently charge the buses. And so we're going to be looking to do this at all the facilities that we have. So the plan build out through 2029, it's again a phased approach. We're starting in our South Bay division. And then over the course of 2 years, we'll be moving to Imperial Avenue, 2 years later, Kearny Mesa, and then our East County division. And concurrently, the sixth division that we're seeking to acquire will also be ready and constructed for post-2029 growth. I've mentioned the sixth division. We're calling it the Clean Transit Advancement Campus. As I mentioned, we have 5 current bus divisions around our service area, but they are at capacity, requiring the sixth division. The analysis that we've received recommends a central site along the I-805 corridor to optimize operations, and which is really close to our future operations and in terms of expansion. We're looking to acquire 10 to 12 acres for up to 250 buses and employ up to 600 employees. And it's going to be electric bus charging for a zero emission bus operation. And as we construct, we'll be looking for LEED certification. So getting into the budgets, back in May, we went to our board and had a public hearing where our board approved our capital improvement program as well as our operating budgets. Quickly taking a look at the capital budget, we did provide a 5-year forecast. We have project needs of just under $1 billion over the next 5 years. Our current funding levels are expected to be $463 million with a funding deficit of just over $500 million. We did receive positive news with the passing of the infrastructure bill at the federal level and positive sales tax returns. And so staff is going to be bringing back the capital improvement program back to our board in June to provide updates to these numbers. And we're expecting our projected funding deficit to drop from the $530 million range to $370 million over that 5-year period. On the operating budget side, as a result of the pandemic, we've had a significant structural deficit where our recurring expenses have exceeded our recurring revenues. And with ridership returning, we're seeing our revenue starting to come back. Passenger revenues have been coming back relatively strongly, and we're expected to get to 80% of baseline by the end of fiscal year 2023. As Brian mentioned in the previous item, sales tax revenues are becoming sizable, and they're becoming strong. Sandag does provide those revenue projections for MTS and Nctd, and those are pretty healthy in the upcoming fiscal year. On the expense side, we are expecting higher service levels. We're including the full year of Midcoast trolley operations. We're also seeing some rate increases on the contracted services side, really as a result of inflation and the minimum wage increases. So we have received federal stimulus funds, and this has been instrumental in us balancing our budgets. We've used this to cover our structural operating deficits. We received about $220 million in CARES Act funds and $140 million in ARP funds, so a total of $360 million in stimulus funds, of which we've used about $182 million from fiscal years 20 up through the upcoming fiscal year 2023. So after 2023, we'll still have about 50% of stimulus funds to bridge the gap as we continue to work to solidifying and solving that structural deficit in out years. So taking a look at the numbers, we have total combined revenues going from $288 million to $340 million in fiscal year 23, an increase of about $52 million. And this is what I mentioned before, riders are coming back to the system, so our operating revenues are increasing by about 13 million, and sales tax revenues are coming in strong. And that number is increased, the primary driver in our non-operating revenues increasing. Total expenses are expected to be $378 million for fiscal year 2023, an increase of $35 million. This is primarily driven by a full year of Midcoast operations, a wage inflation. We're expected service levels for our ADA paratransit and our contracted services to increase somewhat. It's our first full year of Pronto costs, and we have some repair and operational costs that we're expecting in the upcoming fiscal year. So you can see that we have a structural deficit of about $37 million, which is going to be, we're going to use stimulus funds to satisfy. But as you can see, our structural deficit has dropped from $54 million to $37 million, so an improvement of $17 million. So that's we're going in the right direction, and the revenue is really driving a lot of the reduction in that structural deficit. Taking a look at our 5-year projection, we have our total revenues are increasing from about $340 million in fiscal year 23 to a projected $412 million in 2027. Expenses are not growing as fast, but they are still growing from $378 million to $433 million. And we've highlighted that net operating deficit. As I mentioned, we have a $37 million structural deficit. But as you see over the course of the upcoming 3 years, we're starting to see that structural deficit drop. And it's expected to be right around $15 million by fiscal year 2025, and then stabilize at that rate. We do have enough stimulus funds to cover those deficits over the course of the next 5 years, as we continue to look at strategic ways to bring recurring revenues and recurring expenses in alignment, so that we have no structural deficits going forward. And so every year we like to present our operating statistics and how we compare to similarly sized operators. And so we really look at 4 different categories. We look at fare box recovery ratio, operating cost per revenue hour, passengers per revenue hour, and subsidies per passenger. And if you look, we'll start at fare box recovery, nearly a 28% fare box recovery. That's dropped somewhat over the course of the pandemic, but we're still much favorable than our peers. Operating cost per revenue, $116.98, is much lower than our peers, in some cases very sizably. Passengers per revenue hour, average number of passengers per hour of service. We carry 30.1, and that's favorable than all of our peers. And then subsidy per passenger, the amount of public funding for each passenger trip, we're at $2.80. And the next closest is Portland TriMet at $5, just over $5. And with that, that concludes the MTS portion of the presentation, and I can turn it to North County for their presentation.
Thank you very much, Larry. I am Chris Orlando, Chief Planning and Communications Officer for North County Transit District. And with me today is Yoon Park Lynch, Nctd's CFO. We are here to present the proposed operating budget for FY23. Before we dive into the budget, we wanted to start with sharing a bit about Nctd's strategic direction for the coming year. First slide, please. Oh, first slide. Yeah, there we go. These are Nctd's areas of strategic focus that are funded and emphasized within the operating budget for the year. Some of these items represent a continuation of multi-year efforts that will be advanced in the coming year or come to completion in 2023, in FY 2023. Others are new initiatives that respond to our current operating environment. I won't review each of these areas of focus, but wanted to highlight a few key initiatives. Next slide, please. As Larry noted, rebuilding ridership is a top priority for us, and I think for every transit agency across the country. The pandemic has created, as everyone in this room knows, an unprecedented disruption in the economy and in regional travel patterns. During the last 2 years, Nctd has taken proactive steps to not only address the current challenges of the pandemic, but also understand the emerging marketplace and transportation needs of our community as the pandemic subsides. In October 2021, we initiated a project with Deloitte Consulting to conduct a comprehensive analysis of the transportation market in North County. The project is a data-driven, in-depth analysis of our post-pandemic operating environment. It uses artificial intelligence to model potential future scenarios and the resulting impact on ridership. The model will enable us to identify what we're calling no regret moves as Nctd makes its decisions about our transportation network in a post-pandemic world. This project is currently actively underway and will be completed in Q1 of FY23. Next slide, please. In addition, Nctd has been conducting a comprehensive analysis of our Breeze network, our Breeze bus network, through our speed and reliability study. The goal of this effort is to assess our bus service and identify local infrastructure improvements that will make the bus network more reliable and more convenient for our riders. The study will identify specific local projects that will improve not only the speed and reliability of the Breeze bus system, but also provide local traffic congestion relief. It will be completed in Q2, after which Nctd, in conjunction with its member cities, will work on specific local projects to improve Breeze speed and reliability. Next slide, please. While Nctd's primary focus is its transit system, we know we also have a role to play in the region's efforts to address the housing crisis. In FY23, Nctd will continue to advance 10 strategic development opportunities to transform existing single-purpose transit centers into multi-use mobility hubs that include affordable housing. These projects will create ridership demand, generate revenue for the district, and add housing options for our region. Wanted to highlight a few. Our Oceanside Transit Center project is currently under design and entitlement and permitting process. Our Carlsbad, the redevelopment of our Carlsbad stations, which includes our Poinsettia station and our Carlsbad Village station. An RFP for that project is currently active. We expect those proposals to be submitted in June and that project to proceed with project leader selection in the fall. Together, these two projects represent more than 1,000 new units of housing, including affordable housing. Other major projects will be the Escondido Transit Center in the fall, RFP out in the fall of 2022, and then subsequent RFPs at some of our key Sprinter coaster stations throughout the rest of fiscal year 23. Next slide, please. Our region's transit network is also intertwined with efforts to address climate change. In FY23, Nctd will further its bus fleet transition to zero emissions, taking delivery of our first 100% electric buses and procuring our first hydrogen fuel cell electric buses and starting the construction of a new hydrogen filling station. This week, Nctd submitted a grant request to the federal low and no emission bus facilities programs for the purchase of 42 new fuel cell electric buses. If funded, this grant request would result in one of the largest single orders of fuel cell electric buses in the United States. The $52 million request will advance the transition of Nctd's fleet by 7 years, combined with our prior grants and the development of the hydrogen fuel station, which is underway. The grant would bring Nctd's zero emissions fleet to 50 hydrogen buses and 6 battery electric buses in full operation over the next 3 years. Further in efforts towards zero emissions, Nctd is also actively evaluating zero emission locomotives and zero emission Sprinter trains. But we also recognize that it's not just our bus and rail fleet, but our operations that impact the environment. So in FY23, we will also initiate the development of a comprehensive climate action plan for the district to identify other ways we can reduce our environmental impacts. Next slide, please. Transit is not only a tool to help address climate change, but also important for furthering social equity. Nctd has been an active participant in the region's equity-based initiatives, including Sandag's Youth Opportunity Pass. We're working with MTS to extend free transit to our region's foster youth. That initiative will go before our board in June with plan implementation in July. We're also working other ways to drive social equity through our fare system. We are seeking to make our promotional Sprinter Breeze monthly pass, which is a cost-effective option for those who just travel within our service area, making that a permanent part of the regional fare ordinance. We're also exploring offering a low-income coaster fare. But we know that equity is not just about fares. An equitable system is one in which communities of need have access to jobs, to food options, to shopping, to healthcare, educational opportunities, really anywhere they need to go. And these destinations are reachable within a humane travel time and at frequencies that match demand. That's why Nctd is also initiating the development of a transit equity plan to help make our system more equitable, both in terms of our fare structure and access to services. Next slide, please. 2023 will see historic levels of discretionary funding opportunities at the state and federal levels. FY23's budget includes resources to ramp up our discretionary grant strategy. In addition to the transition of our zero emissions fleet, we'll seek funding for several key projects, including Sprinter Corridor double tracking and signal modernization, the Sandag bridge replacement double tracking and fairgrounds platform, and the CP Songs double tracking project, among many other priorities. Next slide, please. Sound financial management is a cornerstone of Nctd's operating model. A major focus now and for the coming fiscal year will be managing expenses and maintaining a balanced budget. Much of our board discussion around the FY23 operating budget centered on ensuring the district is well positioned to weather a potential recession in the future. And with that, I will hand it over to Nctd CFO Yoon Park Lynch for a review of the Nctd FY23 budget.
Good morning, committee members. I will be going through the details on the budget for our coming fiscal year, as well as 5-year plan. Before we start, I do want to mention that Nctd has received awards for both the budget document as well as our annual comprehensive financial report. That award is being presented by the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association. In order to receive that award, both the budget document and our annual report needs to meet criteria related to reporting, and as well as other areas such as policy descriptions, goals, initiatives. So with that said, we have received those awards for the last 19 and 20 years. Next slide, please. Before I start presenting the numbers, I wanted to kind of give an overview of what are some of the significant assumptions that are being developed and included in our budget. We anticipate that we did receive increased funding from the federal level related to the infrastructure law. Also, we see more opportunities for discretionary funding in order to advance our capital projects. Challenges are going to be faced in this coming fiscal years is high inflation and labor shortages. That is across the industry that we are seeing, not only in transit, but just across the broad economy. So, and due to this issue with labor shortages within our budget, we have built within our bus operations increased costs in order to fill current vacancies, as well as retain our current bus operators. We also anticipate that energy costs will be significantly higher in this fiscal year than what had been previously budgeted, up to 78% more for the cost of fuel itself. Although customer ridership continues to show improvements from COVID-19 levels, we anticipate that we will not fully recover in FY23. We anticipate a gradual improvement, but more likely than not, we will not yet be at a full FY19 ridership levels. We also have within Nctd contingency planning. in the event that there's an economic slowdown. Transit agencies in the region are reliant on revenues associated with sales taxes, and obviously in the event that there's a slowdown that could impact that source of revenue. So we have contingency plans in place in the event that that slowdown should materialize. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see that for the next 5 years, we anticipate to have a balanced operating and capital budget. Any surplus will be used and programmed for future capital projects. I do want to bring out that this year, FY23, will be a transition year for Nctd. This will be the first year in which we will be transitioning to bringing in-house rail operations and maintenance. That activity was previously contracted to third parties. Our contract with Bombardier will end in this June related to rail operations. We will be bringing in-house close to 100 FTEs that they will become Nctd employees. This will be a phased approach as we are also planning to bring in-house the functions for signal maintenance away, and facility maintenance towards the end of FY 2023. Also, I wanted to point out that this will also be the first year that Nctd will have to fully fund from its operating budget the costs associated with operating positive train control, that's PTC. That project had been previously funded with FRA and other state funds for the implementation. That project is anticipated to be fully completed by this December, and all funds have already been encumbered for the implementation. So any operating costs are now going to be absorbed with Nctd without having received any additional funding sources from the FRA. Next slide, please. Also wanted to point out that for our next 5-year capital improvement plan, combining the needs from both Sandag managed projects as well for Nctd managed projects, we are looking at a $1.2 billion unconstrained CIP. Out of these capital needs, funding available for Nctd projects is $390 million. So as you can see, there's a gap between what are the funding needs versus what can actually be funded from existing funding sources. But as I mentioned earlier, within our discretionary program, we are actively seeking opportunities to be able to advance more projects from discretionary grant sources, both at the federal and state level. Next slide, please. Also wanted to present in the next 3 slides, Nctd is a multimodal agency. We run multiple modes of service. So in the next slides, you will see statistics for our Breeze, which is more bus, coaster, commuter rail, as well as a Sprinter heavy rail. For Nctd, comparing to peers, you can see that our cost per revenue hour is more towards the low end. And our passenger trips per revenue hour was for 12 passengers in 2020. I do want to point out that 2020 was the first year where we had the full impact of COVID-19. That happened towards the January 2020. So the last quarter, FY20, these numbers reflect within the ridership levels the impact from the pandemic. Next slide, please. This is the comparison of our commuter rail system, which is coaster, to our peers. As you can see, overall, our operating cost per hour is lower to most of our peers. And then also our average per passenger is in line, and our passengers per hour, that reflects the reduction that was directly associated with COVID. Next slide. And finally, this is our Sprinter service. This is a service that runs from Oceanside to Escondido. This one has a higher level of ridership. And for FY20, we carry about 70 passengers per revenue hour. And as you can see, our cost per revenue hour is lower to some of our peers, more in kind of the average, more like in the middle. And that concludes my presentation. So both Chris and myself, we are available for questions. Thank you.
Well, thanks all of you for the detailed presentation. That's very good. Francesca, do we have any public comments or questions?
We do have one member of the public on this item virtually. Tim Bailish, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Very good. Good morning, and to the committee and attendees. I have several questions, or actually maybe comments too, that I'll just list. For the Pronto monthly passes, when school-age children purchase those passes, do they automatically get the waiver? Some of them may still not be aware. One of the bus drivers was mentioning that. Or is there an ad that promotes it when someone signs on to the Pronto system, maybe in the corner, to try to publicize that? And what is the impact for pollution of the zero emission bus transitions purchases, moving to that fleets? For questions about the Nctd report, the BREEZE studies, what is the role for smaller buses, particularly in the north and rural areas, leading into the desire to use autonomous routes? What's the impact on climate initiatives of these also? And some of the criticism I hear repeatedly is seeing large empty buses traveling on routes without passengers in terms of negative publicity for the mass transit. I would like to also bring out the cost impacts or saving from this move away from oil-based fuels, and whether the timeline might allow a more quick transition. Appreciate the good reports, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Bailish. That's our only public comment?
Yes, that concludes the
Okay,
comments.
do we have any board member comments or questions? I do not see anybody with their hand up. So we will then need to have a motion to approve the operating budgets for the transit agencies if somebody would be so inclined to move.
Chair,
This is Member Sankey, and motion yes.
Chair, this is Joanna Schiavone. I wonder if you want to wait for discussion, that's fine too, but I would actually ask if someone can comment on the questions and comments that were raised.
Okay, thanks. When you say questions or comments that were raised, you're referring to the comments raised by Dr. Bailish?
Yes, thank you.
And then just for clarity, I think I did hear a motion from Bill Sankey. And did we have a second on that?
Moreno, happy to second.
And a second from Vivian Moreno. Yeah, so relative to Johanna's question, so maybe staff would like to address some of the questions that were raised by Bill Sankey. I don't know who would be most appropriate for that.
I can take the Pronto questions unless MTS would like to.
That makes sense. Thanks, Chris.
Sure. First, yes, the youth automatically get the free fares. All they simply need to do is have a Pronto card or a Pronto app or the Pronto application, and just simply designate their account as a youth account, and then they will automatically receive the free fares. It is the first screen promoting the program when you go on to ridepronto.com, so it is very present when you log onto the system. And we've been working very closely with MTS and Sandag to actively promote that program. There's been a broad regional effort, a lot of outreach to community-based organizations. Sandag had a really robust community-based organization outreach, a lot of outreach with the schools. I know MTS had and Nctd had lots of interaction with the schools to make sure there's awareness. So we're working hard to make sure everyone's aware of it, but obviously there's always more to do in that regard. So appreciate the comments and encourage all our youth to take advantage of that pass. On the BREEZE question, so the BREEZE speed and reliability study really looks at major corridors and expanding and improving the speed and reliability within those major corridors. So the rural routes that this speaker asked about are not included in this particular study, but we are actively working with the county and in other ways to make sure we're providing good service to the rural communities.
Thanks, Chris. And do you have any information on the estimation of with Nctd's current plans of moving to zero emission, what the actual emission impacts are of that? And I don't know, Colleen, if Sandag has calculated, how that will impact how that incorporates into our RTP needs for reducing transit emissions.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a specific impact to share. The latest move in the request for the 42 additional buses changes and accelerates our plan significantly. So we haven't studied what the impact of that will be in terms of the environment. I can tell you it will be positive, but I don't, in terms of quantifying it, we haven't done that study yet.
Yeah, and I could just clarify here, Chair, a little bit and building on what Chris said. When it comes to how we capture greenhouse gas emissions reductions, SB 375 is only related to cars and light trucks. So that's the calculation we do there. It is in the environmental impact report that was done for the 2021 regional plan, calls for electrifying the system in a pretty short time frame. So this, it's an important part of how we mitigate overall for the impact of the transportation system.
Okay, great. And I think the last question I heard or comment, I don't know if either Sandy or maybe Larry or Chris would want to talk about the selection of vehicle sizes and the possibility of how we could better accommodate the fact that we do have empty buses driving around in the future. That's obviously a pretty lengthy strategic discussion, but it was one of the questions raised.
Yeah. Chair, this is Sharon Cooney, CEO of MTS.
Thanks, be great.
Sure. So one thing I wanted to comment on was the fact that we do have our whole plan for going to zero emission on our website. We have a whole page dedicated to it. So if the speaker would like to learn more, the big driving force as to why we can't go faster is really the infrastructure for electrification. We are actually at an advance of what the state's mandate is, and we will be opening the first all electric, as was mentioned, BRT next year. And so we do have a whole plan of this, and it details the cost. The cost is significantly higher than the cost of CNG alternative, but that is certainly detailed in that report. With regard to vehicle size, we size the vehicles based on the demand, as well as which operator is going to operate it. When people claim to us that they see empty buses, certainly during COVID, we've been impacted by the fact that the economy shut down and it has not fully opened yet. As was discussed about our ridership return, we are seeing much quicker ridership return than we had originally anticipated. So we're hopeful we'll be back to 100%. But frequently you see empty buses because they're either at the beginning or the end of their route. And so a lot of times, for instance, if you live in downtown San Diego or you're working in downtown San Diego, hopefully all of the passengers have gotten off the bus because we're at our terminus. So that's the reason that sometimes you see empty buses. But it's just a matter of how we can accommodate what types of service there are.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think that covered all the questions I heard. Were there any other board member comments or deliberations before we call for a vote? Raise your hand. Seeing nobody up, thanks once again to all the presenters. Very nice presentations. And please, Francesca, call for the vote.
Thank you. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Joanna Schiavone.
I'm going to abstain from this matter.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego is absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
For North County Inland, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
For North County Transit District, Councilmember Bhat Patel.
Yes.
For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Naranjo.
Yes.
And for South County, Councilmember Sankey.
Sankey, yes.
Thank you very much. That item does pass with 8 yeses, 1 abstention, and 1 absence.
Thank you, Francesca. So we will now move on to item number 7, which is the San Vicente Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Update. And I will let Colleen kick us off. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We have so many acronyms and complicated words that we use. And this was something that I learned in the Sandag board workshop last week. And so I thought it was really important to just kind of put all this in context here for members. We're working really hard to try to simplify the way we present information, how we talk about it. Cmcp is one of them. So just so I wanted to be able to explain that when we do the regional plan, we have a whole plan of transportation programs, projects. Projects really at the regional plan level are almost a line on a map. And then it's important to take that line on a map and do more detailed work to look at all the elements of what that line consists of. That's what we do at a corridor level. So for example, with Interstate 5 corridor, the North Coast corridor, the big project opening that we'll have this weekend is a great example. So it's where we look at what the bike and ped improvements, transit improvements, the highway improvements, as well as the environmental components in that corridor. In the San Diego region, there are 12 corridors and they roughly run parallel to our major freeways. In September of 2019, the board of directors set aside funding for us to do these corridor plans, all 12 of them. We started off with 5. And one of the important reasons of doing this, one, it just gets us closer to having shovel-ready projects that are ready for funding. And 2, there's certain state funding, the gas tax funding that comes through Senate Bill 1, that actually requires, there's a certain program that actually requires we do something officially called a CMCP. So there are guidelines on what needs to be included, public outreach that needs to be done. We have 5 of these CMCPs underway, and the San Vicente CMCP is the one that we're here to share with you today. And this is really focused on the area along State Route 67. So some of the others, we have another one that's along the 805 and 5 and where the proposed new purple line would be. That's known as the South Bay to Sorrento. We also have a corridor plan that we're looking at around the Central Mobility Hub. So each of these we're going to be bringing as updates to you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team to really explain where we are in the process here, what our findings are so far, and really look forward to the Transportation Committee input on this. So thank you for the opportunity to provide that introduction, and I'll turn it over to the team.
Thank you, Colleen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Melina Pereira, and I am the Caltrans project manager for the San Vicente CMCP. Mimi Morisaki, the Sandag project manager, is also here to provide an update. So Caltrans and Sandag work together to plan for the future of our transportation system and to align local, state, and federal transportation goals and local objectives in the comprehensive planning process. CMCPs are key components of Caltrans and Sandag's planning responsibilities. And on behalf of the entire project team, I would like to thank you for having us. We presented to the Transportation Committee when we started working on the CMCP back in December of 2020. And now we're here to share the transportation solutions that were developed through the process. Here's a quick overview of today's discussion. First, we will provide some background on the CMCP and parallel corridor efforts. After that, we will review some key needs identified by our analysis and provide an overview of the solutions we're proposing to meet those needs. Then we will provide an overview of our implementation plan, which includes a project inventory, project bundles that we're prioritizing, project phasing, and funding strategies. And then we will conclude with a discussion and answer any questions from the committee. As Colleen mentioned, the CMCPs bring together local leadership and staff, stakeholders, residents, Caltrans and Sandag to develop mobility strategies and programs that support the future. These corridor plans dive deeper into the 2021 regional plan and help the San Diego region compete for transportation funds. Corridor plans are required to be eligible for some Senate bill or state Senate Bill 1 funding, and we are always looking for opportunities to bring more funding to our region. Corridor plans require data, public input, and multimodal analysis, and they must be in alignment with CTC's CMCP guidelines. The corridor plans are looking at all modes of transportation, such as highways, local roadways, transit services, biking, walking, and equestrian paths, goods movement, and technologies needed to help them all work together efficiently. The focus of our meeting today is the San Vicente Corridor, which is shown in orange on this map along the eastern portion and includes SR 67. Let's take a closer look at the San Vicente Corridor. As a brief orientation to the corridor, this slide presents the study area and the area of influence for this plan. The corridor connects the unincorporated communities of Ramona and Lakeside to the city of Poway and the San Diego region and provides access to the tribal lands of the Barona Band of Mission Indians, Ipaya Nation of Santa Isabel, and the Mesa Grande Band of Mission Indians. The study area represented by the slightly darker color on this map is the focus of our proposed transportation solutions. And the draft project inventory we are presenting today will fall within this area. The study area is defined as the area within a 2-mile radius of the 67 extending from Mapleview Street to 10th Street. The surrounding lighter color on the map is the area of influence and represents the area that will likely be impacted by the proposed improvements. Transportation solutions proposed in our draft CMCP are only identified within the corridor study area, but are not precluded from continuing into the area of influence and beyond to complete network gaps and create a more comprehensive transportation system. So here are some of the parallel corridor efforts. Caltrans, Sandag, and the County of San Diego continue to work in coordination to make transportation infrastructure investments on the San Vicente Corridor, and specifically on SR 67. Today, we will focus on the CMCP, but we will quickly review some of the key projects on the 67. The Highway Improvement Project focuses on enhancing operations and improving the safe and efficient movement of people and goods using various modes of travel during both highway operations and emergencies such as wildfires. The alternatives range from the 4-lane widening to shoulder widening to working within the existing footprints to meet evacuation needs. The 67 Pavement Rehabilitation Project will repair and improve the overall ride quality on 67 from north of the San Diego River Bridge in Lakeside to SR 78 and 10th Street intersection in Ramona. Also included is the installation of broadband fiber as part of the project, which will be done as a dig once approach simultaneously with the repaving and will help expand affordable broadband for rural residents. The project is scheduled to begin construction in summer of 2022 and complete construction in fall of 2023. The County of San Diego is also developing projects in the study area. Shown here are the Mapleview Green Streets project and resurfacing on Montecito Road. I will now hand it over to Mimi to discuss the CMCP development process.
Thank you, Melina. The first step in the CMCP process consisted of a literature review and analyzing existing conditions, which identified preliminary challenges and established the baseline conditions. From there, we completed a needs assessment, which identified 7 key needs for the corridor. These needs were identified with help from the first public workshop, stakeholder working group meetings, and subject matter expert meetings. The project team then developed the draft project inventory, which was designed as a comprehensive wish list of transportation solutions. This list included existing plans and projects for the study area, projects identified by the community through the public outreach efforts, and projects identified by the project team and subject matter experts in response to the challenges and needs we've heard. Lastly, we completed an alternative analysis on the proposed transportation solutions. For each project, we looked at its high-level feasibility and cost, performance measure evaluation, and project bundling opportunities. The projects that passed these tests, so to speak, have been retained as projects in the CMCP document. As mentioned, public outreach played an important role in developing the transportation solutions for the corridor. The CMCP project team worked closely with the community and stakeholders throughout the project process and leveraged their knowledge to draft the proposed solutions and strategies. The infographic displays how we engage with a variety of stakeholders, ranging from subject matter expert meetings to virtual engagement activities. We will now present the needs that we've identified and assessed for the corridor, along with the project inventory that addresses those needs. This slide identifies the 7 needs for the corridor that have been developed in collaboration with stakeholders and members of the public throughout the CMC process. I should note that this list is not all-encompassing of ideas, themes, and goals that were considered, and there's no one solution that will resolve any one problem in the corridor, but rather it's a program or series of projects that will collectively address the needs. For example, an active transportation project typically increases safety for the pedestrians, bicyclists, and equestrian users, and many of the utilities projects enhance information accessibility. These needs were the guide for developing transportation solutions that follow, and the full list of solutions are in Chapter 4 of the draft document. Safety is the highest priority for the San Vicente CMCP. We've heard this consistently throughout our public engagement efforts, and we know that 38% of all collisions were attributed to unsafe speeds, and collisions along the corridor have occurred at signalized intersections, sharp curves, and the urbanized portions of the corridor. Therefore, our goals for addressing safety include using data to address hotspot collision locations, systematically applying safety strategies that work within the context of the entire corridor, and restoring and enhancing habitat connections to reduce motorist and wildlife interaction. These goals are then reflected on our project types, as you can see on the screen. While safety was considered in the development of all projects in this inventory, this list of projects are directly focused on addressing specific safety issues, such as falling rock protection devices to alert drivers of the potential for falling rock and prevent fallen rock from reaching the roadway surface, and dynamic message signs to provide real-time conditions like slow or stop traffic. San Diego County's Emergency Operations Plan is used by fire agencies and law enforcement to respond to major emergencies and disasters, and the San Vicente Corridor is vital to the evacuation process. The CMCP and future improvement projects should help towards improving evacuation. It can be part of the larger emergency plan. Projects in this list include shorter term, more immediate projects like warning sirens, smart intersection systems, and tow truck deployment. Other longer-term projects are also included, such as shoulder widenings and a multi-use path that will allow for an additional evacuation lane for emergency vehicle access. The corridor is heavily utilized for both commuting and recreational purposes, and therefore traffic congestion can be an issue on both weekdays and weekends. The goals for addressing traffic congestion issues were two-pronged. 1, address key congestion bottlenecks, and 2, increase accessibility for alternative modes of transportation. Proposed solutions for congestion and goods movement include truck climbing lanes, smart intersection systems, shuttles, and rideshare programs in order to enhance the corridor's efficiency. We found that about 92% of people traveling in the corridor use their vehicle, while 7% walk and only 1% use bikes, which is understandable because walking and biking along the corridor can seem challenging. We also know that there are over 10,000 horses in the corridor, with equestrian activity being very popular. Our active transportation project list includes projects like new bikeways, equestrian trails, and sidewalk enhancements. Other amenities like bike fix-it stations and bike parking are also proposed. Based on Sandag's regional digital equity strategy and action plan, we know that 66% of rural communities in San Diego County have access to fixed broadband, and that expanding accessibility to internet and broadband providers is crucial for these corridor communities. Some of the highlighted goals for utilities includes increasing broadband access, increasing the amount of high-speed chargers, expanding digital infrastructure to help with the deployment of several transportation technology solutions and support evacuation management, and increasing utility resiliency and power backups as power shutoff risk has increased due to wildfire danger. Examples of utility project types include backup power sources to enhance communications during evacuation and EV charging stations for the growing number of electric vehicles on the road.
Thank you, Mimi. And now for our implementation plan. The San Vicente CMCP identified 230 projects and programs for the corridor. Our team assigned high-level cost estimates to each project, and we also went through the process of identifying when each project could be implemented. From there, we put together a series of project bundles to be prioritized. The draft CMCP is posted for review, and there's a link in the agenda. We encourage you to take a look. The implementation plan is in Chapter 5. Please provide your feedback to us. So as I just mentioned, the draft CMCP document was released for public review on May 31st, and the public comment period will close on June 30th. The draft CMCP can be accessed on the digital virtual engagement hub for review and comment. The final CMCP document is expected to be completed by July of 2022. The transportation solution strategies that are identified throughout the CMCP process in accordance with CTC guidelines are eligible for state funding opportunities, which the project team will pursue upon finalizing the CMCP as the agency priorities allow. Other agencies are also welcome to use the CMCP to pursue their own funding. Thank you all for your time, and we look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thanks, Melinda and Mimi. Nice information, really good presentation. Francesca, do we have any public member comments on the presentation?
We do have one public comment on this item. Catherine Rhodes, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Lovely, thank you. This is Catherine Rhodes, and I just want to say you guys did a wonderful job. I'm only halfway through reading it, but it's lovely and thorough and inclusive. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that feedback, Catherine. Supervisor Joel Anderson.
Thank you very, very much. We have a 30-day period right now for people to give input. And I think there's 24 days left in that 30-day period. Part of the challenge is for the backcountry is it's June, and a lot of people, their kids are on vacation and they have taken vacation. Is there a chance that we could extend the input period for an additional 30 days so that we could get everybody's opinion?
Great question, Supervisor. Okay, is there a staff member that could address that? The possibility of extending the feedback?
I don't see a
period?
reason why we couldn't extend the time frame for the CMCP.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So do I need to do anything, or should I be able, can I go ahead and tell my planning groups that they have an extra 3 days if someone's ill?
Did you want to?
Yeah, I think we can just if I'm not mistaken, we can just repost. We can please get the news out. The most important aspect of these corridor plans is public input. Yeah. So absolutely, Supervisor, we can do that. We'll post it, and appreciate you even making the suggestion.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you for your help. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks. Though, Colleen, I mean, if we were going to do that, would you like some direct feedback or authorization from this committee, or how would we actually go ahead and extend the feedback period, or does the board have to do that?
It's not a board mandated
Okay.
issue, so we can go forward and do it. If the transportation committee wanted to take a formal action to do that, you absolutely may, but we take that as direction and we'll be happy to extend the timeline.
Okay, yeah, I'm certainly supportive of extending the feedback period another 30 days. If anybody on the committee feels differently, would you please speak up? I don't think, otherwise I think we just consider that feedback and not have to take a vote on it. Great. Good input, Supervisor. Any other board members with comments or feedback? Jennifer.
I go that way up 67. I wouldn't say frequently, but mainly for recreational purposes. And I was just looking on my phone. There's always a considerable backup in Lakeside at Mapleview. And then I think the next road up is, there's a signal at Willow. And I've often thought, is there any consideration to a roundabout at Willow? This would eliminate, I think it's a three-way intersection. And I'm going to go on, I'm going to give my feedback to this online as well. But I think a roundabout at that intersection could be a consideration to eliminate the backup there. I mean, if you look right now, it's 10:30 and it's not even, rush hour. That intersection, both those intersections are considerably backed up, at least according to my GPS. And then the at Mapleview, there really should be a bridge there, either for the 67 traffic to pass over, or for the Lakeside traffic to pass over. Whatever would be most cost effective. I'd like to see that consideration as well, because as this area continues to grow, and it's just going to, the traffic is just going to get nothing but worse. And you have all those cars sitting there idling, and trucks, as well, going up and down the 67. So that's just my feedback. Thank you.
Good comments. Any other board members? I see no hands up and nobody in the room. There is no action required for this particular item. So that brings us to the end of the regular agenda. Were there any other trailing public member comments at this point, or board comments? From the beginning, I don't see anything, so that'll take us to the end. Our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, June 17th, 2022 at 9 a.m. And with that, thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
You did a great job. Thank you for filling in.
Yes, good job, Chair.